Oh, yes. It's about 8:10 in the morning, and I was looking at this AM, yeah, exist, be. The reply to Moses' question for the name of the deity, I am that I am. And I think that's Exodus 3:14. It indicates the Lord makes himself present as he wills. Quite often when you want God to show up, yeah, and you're praying and you're praying and you're praying and you don't feel God anywhere. I spent about 10 years talking to the Lord, the I am that I am. And maybe Heidi remembers when we moved from Sequim, Washington. When Deacon was born, I had fasted and prayed for 11 days. Yes. hmm And then things began to change, and I really thought that the Lord removed himself from my life. And there's this sounding brass where you pray and God does not answer. And it's somewhat of a scary sensation that you are there interceding and crying out to the Lord, and God does not answer your prayers. The Lord makes himself present as he wills. Well, we had to make a decision as a family about what to do about Jessica. hmm Because Jessica's blind and she was my stepdaughter. So we had invited some persons to our house to talk to us about the Washington State School for the Blind. And on the one side, they said, well, I don't think you should go. And we did know that the Sequim School District did not have available the actual funds necessary for a full-time Braille specialist, a parapro. Yeah. And I'm praying and asking the Lord what to do. And I thought, well, I'll just go into business for myself. It was in July of 2004 that I left WM Financial, and it was July of 2005 we decided to move to Vancouver. And it was one of those experiences where you have to trust that God does know. Even though the Lord did not make himself present, I had to believe that God is in control and I have to trust the Lord. Now, this I am that I am, I tell you, when we moved to Vancouver, we bought a house at 2204 McLaughlin Street, right across from the Washington State School for the Blind. We moved there the summer of 2005, and we lived there until the end of 2009. No, it was probably September, October of 2009. Yeah. Those 4 years were some of the difficult years for me, where I would pray and intercede for hours and hours a day, asking the Lord to bless me. You might remember the credit crisis where everybody thought, well, you should be able to make some money to support your family and you shouldn't have to live on credit cards. And I remember it's somewhat insane, really, to know that you're having a difficult time earning an income and you made $200,000 a year and you know you have the availability of doing it, but it's a credit crisis. hmm And no one really wants to buy any products when their real estate is going down, and you don't you don't really understand why that is. I mean, it was a crisis. Well, I was there, and I really did everything I could to support my family. My sons never suffered. Jessica didn't suffer. Heidi didn't suffer. Yes. We did always eat really good, and I remember thinking that God has been present with me many times in my life. And when we moved to Airway Heights, we lost the house to foreclosure, and I thought, well, Lord, We're going to find a place to live, and we did. And it was a huge blessing. Then Heidi had seen a video on YouTube about the Marine buildup. And she said, I want you to watch this. And I agreed. And I watched, could have been a representative or a senator of the United States Congress asking that if we spend $15 billion on Guam, won't it tip the island over? And I thought that was one of the smarter elected representatives of the U.S. Congress. But knowing that there was only 137,000 residents and that much money being spent seemed like the right place to go for us as a family. And Heidi did agree. She wanted to go there. And it was a difficult time. The I am that I am. Now, I forgot which. Well, we went there, and I had made arrangements. Heidi was 7 months pregnant when we flew from Airway Heights, yes, to Hawaii, and then Hawaii to Guam. And there were two families that did meet us there at the Guam Airport Hotel. Oh no, the Guam Airport. Yes. Debbie and Pete and Trisha, Trisha and Jerry. Yeah. I had called St. Paul's Assembly of God Church before we left Airway Heights, some months before, to make sure that we had somebody there to help us as we transitioned to Guam. Yeah. And it was quite a transition. It really was. But I had learned a long time ago that even though I don't feel the Lord, it doesn't mean that God doesn't hear. Now, is Exodus 3:4, here am I. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. Yeah. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. Yeah. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here am I. And he said, draw not thy hither, but put off thy shoes from thy feet. For the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Now, this thought of God being the I am that I am, let's say that those that have been to the third heaven are those that have seen Jesus. I've heard so many testimonies about how Jesus appeared to just regular old Christians. And I thought if God ever appeared to me, I'd tell him to go right back to heaven because I don't have any.